Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Happiness Is podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg-Shaped. And today I am under some pressure because I have a pro. I have a podcast superstar on, a commentator, a man who is employed to talk. So he's going to show up the amateur here. It's a man that I met through Doddy Weir, who has introduced me to many people. We've never met in person, and I hope that day will come. But we've met on the screen in situations like this, and I am so happy he's been able to find some time and tidy his bedroom because he is crazy busy, and I am really excited to have the one and the only Mr. Nick Heath joining us. Hello, sir.
What an intro. How very kind. How are you, Bruce?
Yeah, I'm very well, and I'm so happy to have you. It's been trying to put all the bits of the jigsaw together, but I've tracked you down for a bit of your precious time.
There we go. Yes, had a quick tidy, put things back, lines, but had to make it all, It was all there already. It's fine.
It is funny that we've now, in this period, been able to jump inside people's homes and see what's going on. And I'm impressed with so many people that I never thought would read many books seem to have shelves and shelves and shelves of books.
Yeah, I ended up just getting hold of that actually when it was when I was starting on work on the Lions tour with TalkSport, and actually I was just like, I need something where all the stats are, and that book is amazing. So then I was like, that's going to look great behind everything. So yeah, it does the job.
And you've been really busy during lockdown. You started by doing absolute nonsense that just made people laugh. Talk us through how you got started in that.
Yeah, it was all a bit crazy, really. It was, we could see lockdown coming in March 2020, are we? It's weird. I think for some people it feels like it was 5 minutes ago, and then in other ways it can feel like it was about 4 years ago. So I think people have all got a different take on how the last 18 months has been, but or 15 months, whatever it is. But yeah, just was out and about, decided to rehash an old parody silly voice of my kind of Mickey take commentator on some people kicking the ball around in the park. Saw some mothers pushing some pushchairs along, and yeah, just went for it. Decided I'd share it online for people that may also be having a week where they're going, cool, things are not feeling great or looking great. And then yes, Greg James decided to pick up on it and put it out on Radio 1 the next day, which then sent it rather viral. And I'm big in Canada. It seemed to really take off in North America, possibly because they were probably just thinking, I love this plummy English guy who does these voices or whatever. So yeah, it was absolutely bananas. But it's incredibly still giving. It's still paying off what I did, and I've been very lucky with it. I do, I have subscribed to the idiom of, you make your own luck. And so an element of deciding to put something out there and do something a bit different has definitely opened a few doors that otherwise wouldn't, and has brought in a few extra revenue streams that otherwise I wouldn't have had. So yeah, it's been a fairly mental year. The funny thing is, like, my social media followings went bananas, but as rugby started returning last August and I started going back to doing games, I could just tell they were all, I think, my following was about 15,000 of fairly devoted rugby folk. And then it went up to 125,000. It's settled back down a bit, but I still think probably 60,000 of those are people that are waiting for me to do a silly clip of some sort, and they don't give a monkeys as to the fixtures being released in the Gallagher Premiership. But that's they chose to follow me, so they'll get everything that I'm across.
And you've just had the TV show come out where you commentate. Is that one of the nice little side effects from the nonsense?
Yeah, it certainly is. Yes, The Void on ITV. I got contacted in April last year. Actually, one of the earliest people from a kind of sporty, entertainmenty background. I got contacted by a production company that said, we're looking to try and make a show for ITV, an entertainment sort of game show, a bit like Ninja Warrior, a bit like The Cube, kind of bit of skill and a bit of athleticism. And we just need someone to do a voiceover on this 3-minute reel we've got that we filmed to try and sell it to the channel. And then I got a call about the end of May, middle of June this year, saying, by the way, remember that voiceover you did for us? We've made our show. And I was like, oh, awesome. And they said ITV want to hear a couple of voices proposed that would do the commentary on the games. So we'd like to use you. We'll propose a couple of others, and we'll see what happens. And then a few days later, they came back and said, right, you're the man for everyone. We start doing it in the next couple of weeks. I was like, oh wow, okay. So it was weird. It was just at the time as well. That came in the week I had shared on social media the fact that I was going to be doing a couple of England games on Channel 4, which was a nice feather in the cap. I've been fortunate enough as my career has grown over the years. Done plenty of women's internationals, women's Six Nations, men's Six Nations highlights for different clients. I've done international men's games of different competitions. You often do world feed while there's a host broadcaster. So you might be, my mates in Australia might hear me, but people in the UK wouldn't necessarily. So to have been asked to do the two England games against Canada and the USA for Channel 4 recently was just a tiny little box that had remained unticked for me, which was, a home international to a home UK audience on live telly. So it was lovely to be able to do that. So I was very gleefully sharing that on social media, and lots of lovely people saying, "Oh, it's great news, well done," or whatever. And then that afternoon, I got the call about the Channel 4, about the ITV show, The Void. I was like, I can't put this out now because people are just going to go, "Oh, you can." So it was. It's been a pretty mental couple of months, really.
I don't think people would though, because everybody loves Nick Heath.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, but I mean, it's a one-man promotion trail when you're self-employed. So there are definitely harder days and tougher days, and everyone has them. But certainly, I think it's nice to shout about when things are going well, and people have been kind to me over the years, and so it's nice to be able to share that for those people that have been supportive. I think, I mean, if anything, I've said this a couple of times, but one of the things that came off the back of the live commentary series of clips that I did was, there were people contacting me, Canadian American housewives, and it was kind of like, my husband watches the game, but if this is what sport can be like, count me in. And you're a bit like, well, actually, why can't it be more fun? Why can't it kind of
100%
have room for more levity and that kind of thing? And I get, there are people's careers at stake. There's a lot of money in sport, and people are putting their bodies on the line, and jobs and all that. So I get that there is a serious element to it, but most people are tuning in to watch their team or watch any game for a bit of escapism, for a couple of hours of enjoyment and entertainment. And so actually, I think there's plenty of room for there to be levity in these things. Not necessarily to completely lose the sense of occasion and the focus on it, but it's taught me a bit, or at least it's made me less apologetic about wanting to have a bit of fun in what I do.
I love it, and I totally agree, because now studios are full of pundits. BBC have got 3, so ITV get 4, and they've all got their little toys of here's the space and here's what happens. But for most people that tune in, they're supporters rather than coaches or players or analysts. So I think having that element to it is absolutely needed. And you bring that just in your personality, but that comes from where you've come from. You've had a really interesting journey to this point. You can't possibly have predicted this path that you found yourself on.
No, not at all. Particularly in the last year, but no. Yeah, I mean, I left school with my older brother and sister had been to uni, so that was the destination path for me. But I had a wonderful time in my last 2 years of sixth form at school and didn't work hard enough to get the grades. So I was billeted to the University of Central Lancashire in Preston, which is a pretty good university by all accounts these days. But in 1997, it wasn't, or it certainly didn't suit me that much. I had fun up there for a few months, getting to know a few crazy Cumbrians and Northerners, but decided that it wasn't quite for me. I was heavily involved in acting, performing at sort of the last few years of school and at my local theatre. So I decided to run away and join the circus and audition for drama school in London, which I did, and then abandoned uni, went to drama school for 3 years in Clapham, and then spent 7, 8, 9 years working in various different areas, not necessarily on stage, but promotions, agencies, companies, places where you just go and play a part, do a role. It might be for a corporate event or whatever it might be, and I was DJing as well, and kind of hosting quizzes and various bits, and just generally, if I could be a jumped up idiot on a microphone, then that was the gig for me.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah, exactly. Preaching to the converted here. So I was doing lots of that. Some of my fellow acting buddies were working very hard to be very good and worthy, talented actors, but they were living on £100 a week, and I was not prepared to do that. But I sort of got to a point around 2007-8 when I was just at a bit of a crossroads, wasn't quite sure what the next move was going to be, and had a bit of an epiphany to try and get into broadcasting, which was actually what I had applied to try and do from school, but didn't get anywhere near the grades. But I knew I had the ability to do it. I knew I was kind of nosy and interested in it enough that actually, I don't know what I'm doing, but I backed myself to be able to do it. And so I looked into doing courses, but a lot of them were like, oh, and we'll teach you shorthand and this and that. And I was like, I'm not going to go and apply to be, the lead correspondent at the Times or Telegraph or whatever. I want to get into broadcasting. We could see the beginnings of YouTube back then. It feels like YouTube's been around forever, but at that point it was very much in its infancy. So I was like, well, look, I could get myself a DSLR camera. I could start shooting some bits and pieces. Maybe I'll get a podcast out there talking about the sport so that at least there's some history to me being involved in that way. And no one listened to podcasts in 2007 and 8. But I did one regardless. Got in touch with a guy called James at the Rugby Blog, as was back in the day. Started doing a podcast then. And then got a call from Simon Ward, who was working on the RFU England podcast at the time, and he said, "Look, we're doing some interviews next week. I need another pair of hands. I like your interview style, so would you consider coming and helping me? I can pay you £50." And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be paid to speak to England." And that was where it started. And the commentary was very much my focus, but I also knew that I had to just continue to develop a relationship within the sport. I understood that actually, if you want access to Ben Foden at the time, for example, well, actually your relationship with the Northampton press officer was more important than necessarily by the time you get to the player. So on your first year or two of being on the scene, you might get the chance to speak to their 22-year-old replacement second row, which you've got no interest in speaking to, but you'll go along with it, because if the interview's half decent and you put out the content and they can see that you've shown respect to them as a club and to the player, well, then next time they'll say, okay, well, yeah, who do you want this time? And so I learned the trade kind of that way. And doing a weekly podcast when I thought all I would be doing was, I don't know, reading the paper into a microphone or reading off the BBC website was a fairly steep learning curve, but incredibly valuable, certainly.
But you got the relationship bit early. Where did that confidence come from? Was that because you'd done lots of acting, that you knew how to go about it and play a part, or is that some of the personal skills from family life?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit more of the latter. My dad is not a shy and retiring type. This apple has not fallen too far from that tree. He was a rugby referee for 25 years, and has often been life and soul of a party. I'm the youngest of three, and I was sort of born 6 years after my middle brother. So, I was the little golden-haired cherub that basically was going, "Look at me! What? Why aren't you looking at me if you're not looking at me?" So I was just a show-off, basically. So there's always kind of been a contentedness to be in front of people, hence the acting side of it. But I think at that stage it was a chance to. I'd actually spent quite a few years not that engaged with rugby, so I realised like people can turn around to me even now and talk about sort of games. I've sort of got a black period post 2003 where I was sort of just living in London, seeing my mates, having the time of my life, and sort of 2004 to 2007. So no idea what was going on anywhere really. So it
wasn't a great period anyway. So
well, yeah, I mean, certainly, I think I remember chatting to someone about the fact that, you know, when England won the World Cup in 2003, there were an awful lot of sort of, you know, Chelsea football fans and others that went, and we won a World Cup, do we? Oh, we'd better go down to Twickenham and watch England. And then Martin Johnson did such a good job of England being terrible for the subsequent few years that I think most of them ripped up their debenture seat tickets and went back to supporting football. It was an odd way for rugby to make sure that only the diehards stayed in the sport. Yeah, that was my outlook on that. But yeah, I thought, you know, if I can get to talking about it with the knowledge and understanding of the game that I have. I mean, I then trained as a referee myself to begin with, as I was embarking on the kind of you know, media and broadcast side, and then I realised that I was good to be needed to be attending games at weekends more than I was going to be able to be refereeing them. So it was a fairly short-lived career with the whistle. But it was good because, you know, I'd run the line from my dad. I was always interested in the laws. It was good to get up to date with them, then to be able to, you know, be on the field myself, be in touch with the grassroots side of the game, and then, yeah, started having more opportunities to then be in conversation with whatever it might be, England players, club players, that kind of thing. Getting accreditation to go to games and all of that side of things, you know, hugely exciting when that first starts to happen, and you're able to flash your pass and wander into the press box or the broadcast gantry at Twickenham and go, right, I am here for the Autumn Internationals. It's 2012. Chris Ashton has just romped in one of the greatest scores ever against Australia, and the whole place is rocking, and I'm here for free, getting to cover this. I mean, you know, I was a pig in the proverbial. So all those years were really good, a really good basis for me, and I then started to get into the commentary. But I think for me, it was about having the confidence and knowing that I knew what I was talking about within the game, because it had kind of been in the family. And then also learning some of the technical stuff. You know, I remember going to do my first commentary for BBC Surrey when I was up in Nottingham, and I was covering Nottingham Esher on a Friday night. Didn't leave enough time for the traffic. Got there late. I was meant to be getting a replacement player to come and join me to do the game. I was nervously setting up a Glen Sound box, which is what you plug all the commentary mics and headphones into. Had never done it before. I'd been shown in the studio, but all of a sudden I'm like, the game kicks off in 20 minutes and I'm not ready. So I'm trying to put all of that together, and then I'm shouting down. I'm like, oh, sorry, I think I was told I was getting an injured player. They were like, no, we haven't actually got anyone for you. Sorry. I was like, oh, good. I'm now doing this whole game on my own. And then I basically started the game. I'm about a minute into it after kickoff, and a chap comes up the stairs and he spots the empty headset and microphone next to me and just points to it. And I'm like, while I'm talking, trying to gesture him in, and he walks in, puts his BBC pass down, and it was a guy called Dominic Busby, and he just sat down. So then, sort of next stoppage, I was just like, and of course, with us this evening is Dominic Busby. How are you, Dominic? So that to people listening, they're like, oh, he's obviously been there the whole time. His summariser, and we got to half time. I pulled off my headphones and I was like, hi, Nick Heath. It was absolutely bananas, and Dom was amazing to me that day. Unfortunately, he very sadly passed away recently. And listening to the tributes around and about, it seems he was the man of sport in cricket and rugby, and was all over every sort of regional BBC station over his career. It was a sad loss for him recently. But I feel very privileged that I've got a lovely little story of when he came to my age right at the start of my career to be able to remember him by.
But those people help to just that little moment, or that big moment as it probably was for you, has stuck with you. So you then building relationships with other people, that's a great model to follow, even though you didn't know him and he wasn't necessarily someone that, you know, you were in awe, but him giving you that allows you then to pass that on. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's about asking questions of people sometimes as well that they may not have asked themselves. I've had, you know, young journalists, young guys leaving colleges or doing journalism degrees over the years message me and go, hi, I want to do what you did. How do I do that? Or I want to get into journalism. Where do you suggest I start? And actually, you know, that you can't really answer those questions, because what you have to then do is just turn them back to that person and say, well, what area of journalism? What excites you? What do you want to do? Do you want to be speaking on radio? Do you want to be writing the lead column for The Guardian? Do you want to be on TV? Do you want to be reporting? You know, there are so many areas and so many threads. And I was fairly, you know, I knew that I wanted to commentate. But actually, when I first started out, I was doing bits of, you know, I was doing a podcast for 2 years. I was taking my camera and going and filming interviews with players. And at that stage, clubs didn't really, they were very slowly embracing of social media, Twitter to begin with. They knew they should be producing video bits, but they didn't, you know, they had one media manager who was looking after writing the program every week, getting the team news out, doing any of the interviews, putting it on the website. You know, these people have been, you know, chronically underpaid and overworked historically as a role in most rugby clubs. If you ever see a media manager in a rugby club, just say thanks. They'll appreciate it. And so I was able to turn up to a few people and just say, well, I could film this and give it to you if you want. And like, that'd be amazing. And so I started doing that and then charging people for it, and different clients online as well. I ended up providing video to ESPN Scrum for a good few years, from Rugby World Cup 2011 and these kind of things where you're like, well, actually, if I can do a bit for you and a little bit for you and a little bit for you, then the grand total of it all means that I can pull together enough revenue to go and cover this tournament or that competition, whatever it might be. So all those kind of learnings, as I was growing through the industry, I think have been invaluable in terms of being able to help others and go, well, you know, there are different ways you can do it. The main thing these days is if you want to do it, you just start doing it. You know, you've got a microphone in your smartphone and you've got a camera there that's now bigger HD than the one in the bloody BBC News studio. So, you know, get out there, start writing, start doing it, put it on a platform, put it on a blog, whatever it might be. Yeah, I mean, I think as I was going through, it confused the hell out of people who I was and what I was doing, because I managed to stumble across the sort of company name Rugby Media, which is what I sort of still operate under. But and I was very pleased with that. I was like, okay, well, I'll be covering rugby and from a media side and various types of media, so that's good. But I know that people were like, oh, have you met Nick Heath? Yeah, he's that. Well, he's sort of, I mean, he was announcing at London Scottish last week, but I think he does a sort of video. Yeah, well, he does a podcast, doesn't he? Yeah, no, I mean, he was hosting the thing from O2. I don't know what he does, but he's just everywhere. But I was kind of quite worried in those years, because I was like, while it's good for me to have a finger in a lot of pies to help, you know, keep the rent paid, it's not defining me as a broadcaster. If you're a writer, you start off at a paper as an underling and you work your way through and you become correspondent, and then, you know, there's a path for you, and people see that path. It's very traditional, and promotions are celebrated, and you know, your progress is tracked. Whereas, you know, the way I've come through has been a little bit here, a little bit there, and a little bit everywhere. So by the time it gets to a producer phoning and going, hello, we'd like you to do England's 2 internationals in the summer on Channel 4. You go, you know, that is a clearly defined role, and people will know exactly, you know, what I can do and where I can do it, and that's a nice element of recognition, even if there'll be plenty of people that go, oh God, it's not this bloke, is it?
I don't think there's many people that do that. I love hearing this, because I'm a school teacher. I've worked in schools for however long, and worked in the pastoral area, and that tends to mean careers, tends to mean university, tends to mean what you're going to do. And I think only recently, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years, the language that I use to kids is similar to what you've just said there, if you're passionate about it. So if you're passionate about it, you'll put time and energy into it. You'll enjoy doing it. If you enjoy doing it, you'll get better at it. If you get better at it, then it might end up being your job. You might never drive a big car or have a big house, but you'll like what you do. You strike me as someone who likes what they do, but I'm also interested in, did you do lots of things because you weren't necessarily a name, so you had to build your reputation by saying yes to things?
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it is, you know, I think one of the things that, or one of the truths I think that I'm sort of coming to terms with, which isn't an easy one for anyone who's younger, I think, to possibly get their head around. But, you know, in my what was it, late 20s, early 30s, when I was kind of getting into the rugby side of it, I I worked out that there are, PR or marketing agencies that look after the Guinness or RBS or major sponsor, and they've got some cash and they're sponsoring a league, but ultimately they also need to be activating their sponsorship. They need to be putting stuff out there. So I was trying to contact these agencies and going, you've got some money and I'm in rugby and all of these clubs trust me. So how about I go in and request to speak to these players and then you can have it from me. Everyone's a winner and you pay me some money, please. And some of these sort of agencies were like, yep, sounds good to us. But a lot were like, who are you? And I couldn't even get to speak to the right person. And a lot of people I know back then who were of a similar point in my career within these kind of ad agencies, creative agencies, sponsorship agencies, they've all gone through their careers at the same point I have. So now 10, 15 years later, a lot of them are, account directors running things, and they know how long I've been in the industry. And so as a peer group going through the game or the peripherals of the game and everything that goes with it, I think you sort of graduate to a point where actually you're very well connected. And I think as much as I was hungry to be in and part of certain things and have people understand who I was and what my reputation was that I was trying to build, some of that was just going to take a natural amount of time, and that's quite hard to hear. I think if I was telling that to myself at the age of 28, 29, it's just like, well, some of it might come off, keep trying, but it's going to be a lot easier when you're 38, 39, 40, because by that point people have known you for 10 years and, call it old boys network, I think, but it's ultimately about people just knowing who you are, what you do. So I can get contacted by a friend of mine at an agency and go, we've got an event, we need someone to host it. It's right up your street. You'll be exactly what we need. I don't need to lose sleep over this. We'll send you the brief the day before. We'll see you at 10 o'clock. Fine, done. And that side of things is lovely to be at. It's nice to be at that point. But yeah, there were many years of definitely feeling I had to prove myself and being in scenarios where, you've got X or Y rugby personality who is sort of meant to be the focus of the day or whatever you're involved with, and they've shaken your hand and looked over your shoulder for someone more interesting walking into the room, and there are a few of those in the game, and you'll have your own short list of who you think they are, and I'll have mine. But I also quite quickly thought, well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over these people. I definitely said to myself very early on, and maybe someone even said it to me, don't ever expect or want any of these sports people that you're spending a lot of time with, that are many people's heroes and idols, to be your mates, because their mates are on the rugby field, their friends and family are their mates. You're someone they often meet through a work environment, because that's what professional sport is for most people. Now over the years I've ended up becoming close enough to some players that have definitely become friends, but there are still some that I see may see regularly, have known for 10, 12 years, but I wouldn't say we're mates at all. We're just capable of going, hey, how are you? Yeah, good. You? Great. Okay. So the game this weekend, and that's all you're going to get, and that's fine too, because I think going into it with the idea of I can't wait to meet my heroes and make them my friends is a really foolish way of going about it. It's like when I was at drama school and they came around the group and said, okay, so why are you here? And for me, the very clear answer was to try and be the best actor I can be, to work on my voice work, my physical work, everything I can do to make me as best as I can possibly be, to give my career the best chance. And about 3 of the people in the room out of 20 of us just went, to be famous. It was like, oh, I think the course director is about to take you out and line you up against the wall and shoot you. Like, is that why you're here? Really? So, one might begat the other if you're good enough at what you do. But if that's your sole aim, you're an idiot. And I think in a parallel world within rugby, if your aim is to get into it because you want to become best mates with Doddy Weir, well, that's not why you do it. You get into it and do good things and earn a reputation, and then people, call on you to do things, and you go and you have moments that I do, regularly, where you turn around and go, this is cool. This is pretty magic. People would give their eye teeth to be here. So yeah, that's. I can barely remember the question, but I've rambled.
That's okay. I absolutely loved it, and I remember being a very young teacher. And my heart broke when a girl in my tutor group told me that she wanted to marry a footballer. So at 15, her ambition was to be a footballer's wife, and she was sporty. She was doing well academically. She had friends. And I've seldom speechless, but that I'll never forget that girl. I could paint you a picture of that moment because it's stuck in here. And you're right, there are so many people who, what do you want to be when you're older? Famous, but they don't know what for.
Yeah.
They don't know in what thing they're going to do to give them that end outcome of fame. Who have you been with? You say those pinch yourself moment. Where were you and who were you with when you had a moment where you thought, this is me? I can't believe I've made it here.
That's an interesting question. It's a good one. I think the first one that just came into mind when you said that, actually, which was I commentated on a women's international where Emily Scarrett and Mo Hunt were injured. And so the two of them were on co-commentary with me. And we were in vision from the top of the show, and we were having a chat, and they even gave Mo a little device to do some analysis on. And but before the show, I had enough of a relationship with those two that we knew we were going to have fun with it and enjoy being together. They were also massive women's international players, still are, obviously. I had one of those definitely then, because I just thought there are hundreds of girls or thousands of girls at this game that would love to be getting their autograph or talking to these two, and I'm about to prat about with them for 2 hours, having a good time, doing a game that should really deliver. I think it was England Canada, maybe, was it? It was that was one of those, because although we had started to become mates, I also felt pretty honoured to be their mates in that sort of environment and to be working with the two of them who were so good. But I'm trying to think of others.
Please put that on your website. What job do you do? I prat about for a couple of hours.
yeah. This is generally how I look at it. I mean, and actually talking about even that Autumn International Series 2012, I think was massive. That was. I'd been an accredited journalist attending Twickenham for a couple of years by that point, and so I knew the score, I knew what was going on. I was doing some reports for Talking Rugby, an agency that was going to Twickenham and sending radio reports to various radio stations at the time, and you would literally sit there with a call list from, let's say the game was kicking off at 3:00, from 2:40, and you'd do a 30-second preview to LBC. Then you'd hang up and you'd do a 30-second preview to BBC London. Then you'd hang up, you'd do a 30-second preview to TalkSport. And you'd do about 6 or 7 stations over the course of 20 minutes. And then the game would start. And after about 10 minutes into the game, you'd then start doing first half updates to all those stations. Because it made, they had the business plan idea, which was quite sound, was, well, if we can get some revenue from all of these stations that can't afford to send their own reporter to the game, then they're getting what they want, but collective revenue works for us as a service. So it was a good idea, and the guys at Talking Rugby brought me on to do that, and I did that for many years. But actually being able to do that while sitting there watching, England beat New Zealand, and Chris Ashton's length of the field score and all that kind of stuff is just sort of, it's boys' own stuff. It's what dreams are made of, to be sitting there. And I think at that stage, that was probably the last time I still felt a certain level of fandom with England, and sort of a little bit, oh my God, I can't believe this. And I was nervous and sort of shaking, and the adrenaline of actually being there to watch the performance and of the team. And I don't have that anymore, really. It's interesting. It's my kind of loyalty has waned on most fronts. I think the work I've done with Harlequins meant I was pretty chuffed to see them lift the Premiership title recently, particularly playing the sort of rugby they did. I think a lot of people were behind them, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm quite impartial these days. I can want certain players that I've got good relationships with to have their moments in the sun and believe that they would deserve them. But then there are other moments when I think, yeah, I'm not entirely behind your team and your culture at the minute. So if it doesn't work out for you, oops.
There's something nice though. I hear what you're saying. Being at Murrayfield still massively excites me, but there are things about it that are not new anymore. But there's something really nice about that comfortable feeling of I know the score. I know that I can do this. I know like the relationships. I know that I can have a chat to that person. I know that I can grab a coffee from there. Knowing those those little dodges are nice, aren't they? And just probably some of that comes, I don't know if you agree, but probably from my own insecurity, that I've now gone through maybe the initiation, that I can feel comfortable in my skin in the situation that I'm in. Is that something you'd relate to?
Yeah, I think a little. I certainly, the privilege side of it never passes me by. And I think, I was lucky enough to be going to Twickenham when my dad would take me as a kid, and someone else will answer that. I used to go to Twickenham loads, and so that privilege has never really gone, and I don't think it ever should. And same for you at Murrayfield. And actually, I'm ashamed to say I only managed to make my bow at Murrayfield for the first time for the Japan game recently, and I got to stand. They actually weren't allowing access into the media room, but I got to stand and take a picture of the Bill McLaren media room, and he is, he's part of the reason I do what I do. Just out of shot, one of his big sheets is hanging on the wall up there.
Yeah, mine's here. The only big sheet I feature on, I have
really?
a copy of. Yeah, I only featured on one, and I've got the copy of it, and it is absolute pride of place.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah, so I've got the 1999 Cup final, World Cup final. A friend of mine, I think, has bought another one for me. But anyway, the most interesting thing for me, which almost broke my heart momentarily on those, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, is that the lovely lines of "they'll be dancing in the streets of Sydney and Brisbane" and whatever, they're all there. They're all written. They're all prepared, and that is absolute testament to the fact that the best bits that you want are done through preparation and working out where you need to be at the right time. He sounded the greatest because he was able to make it sound like it was on the spur of the moment. But anyway, I've digressed to my.
Have you been to Hawick?
No, I haven't yet. That's
right. The next time you come to Murrayfield, let's go to Hawick. We'll go to the Bill McLaren bust. You'll see Wilton Park, where he coached for many, many years. I'll take you on a tour of Hawick.
Oh, I look forward to that. That would be magic. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, going back to your question, I mean, the sort of sense of insecurity. I don't know that I necessarily would have had that. I think. I don't know whether there's a certain arrogance of having been to Twickenham so many times as a kid that by the time I was allowed into its kind of inner workings, that I was like, yes, well, this feels like the natural progression of where I've been before. I don't know, but there is something. I still feel, I still love the fact that I'm privileged enough to be there, and that I know the sort of inner workings of a lot of it. I struggle now, I think, to actually be a fan at somewhere like Twickenham, which shows probably how far that relationship has gone. The sort of queuing up and drinking 5-6 pints over the course of a game, and just cheering on from the stands or whatever, just seems a little alien to me these days, and probably because. And this is one thing that I actually I'm sort of having a few chats with people, for example, at the RFU, is what is the fan experience like? Because if I'm sat in the stands from a media perspective, I'm connected to the referee. I've got different, I've got everything going on, and I know exactly what's happening. Whereas fans these days, you can get a RefLink radio, but certainly the one at Twickenham is the same as it was about 25 years ago, and it's terrible. And you can only just about get the referee, but you can't get any of the commentary. So you're quite detached, weirdly, sitting 70 meters from the pitch. So anyway, I've sidetracked on something else, but I think the fan experience at a lot of these stadia could be improved to bring them into the game. I think some people talk about the NFL referee style being broadcast around the stadium, and yeah, maybe there's time for that. But I think, but then I guess the other side of the argument is people are really happy to be there and to be having a wonderful day. But part of it is also being sat in the stands, chatting the hind legs off their mate about what's gone on over the last couple of weeks, and the game is almost a sort of small part of that, because it's about the social occasion as much as anything else. So I'm not going to suddenly make people have to get into the nauseating detail of a rugby game if actually that's only 20% of the reason they're there.
And you're still playing, you still go and play touch, so you're still in contact with the grassroots. How much stick do you get for things you said or commentaries you've given, or does it not matter? You're just there to play touch?
Yeah, more the latter. Interestingly, it's more the grief I get from people on the journalism and media side that are just like, "Oh, you still think you're a player, do you? You're playing touch. It's nothing." I'd love them to put some boots on and try a game of touch and see how long they last, to be honest. But
yeah, me too.
I find it. I actually find it really useful, and I played to a decent level a few years ago, and the journey into doing that and the amount of time it took, bearing in mind the coaches were laying down S&C and diet plans for us and various things, and we had monthly training camps and various things, and it took over my life for a good sort of 6 to 9 months. And as a window into the amateur game, and particularly where the women's game has been at, I was able to really kind of identify with it. And by the time I'd sort of played in the tournament, and I ended up meeting up with a couple of the England girls, and I was just like, God, it's unbelievable. I've got a real insight into how much time it takes, how you have to balance everything, the sacrifices you make, because I haven't seen any of my mates. I've not been to a birthday or a wedding this summer. I've been having to do training and all sorts. And I think Emily Scarrett turned around to me and just went, no, not sacrifices, it's choices.
Quite right, Emily.
And I just turned around and went, "Are you media training me as to what I should be saying?" She was like, "Yep, absolutely. That's what you have to say. It's choices. It's not a sacrifice. No one's making you do it." I was like, oh, "Okay, very good." But I do think that definitely meant that my empathy towards commentaries on the women's game, particularly, subsequently was influenced by having had that experience of playing, and also just knowing what my body feels like or has felt like for the last 2 days when I played a high level comp for the first time on Sunday for the first time in ages, and I feel like I've been hit by a car. So, I'm no spring chicken, but even so, the idea of actually that's how most professional rugby players feel on a Sunday, Monday anyway. And they do it week in, week out. And that toll on the body, particularly on the last year that we've had, where I think, things resumed beginning of July, in terms of the pre-season, the 3-week pre-season they had out of lockdown. Then a lot of rugby resumed in October. Then there was a 3-week off season for most, certainly in the Premiership, and then back in. So I think most of the players are feeling like, they've had a season that has gone for a full-on year, and if you're in a Lions squad, it's still going. So that's hard. That's hard to take, and actually, I think if you're therefore aware of that as a writer, a broadcaster, someone working within the game, then actually it's nice to be able to identify with that and show that empathy with players, because it helps you understand that these are human beings and people that are doing this.
That empathy thing hits home with me. I was really frustrated by some of the nonsense on social media off the back of the Women's Six Nations, because Scotland took pelters for all sorts of things with people who don't know how to judge it because they don't have that insight like you have. What level some of the players are at. Some of them are at work. Some, those life choices that they're having to make. You've been a real champion of the women's game. How and why did that come around?
I got an opportunity to work on it quite early on, 2010, I think. But my sister had played, and my cousin Emily had played, and they actually had a game while my sister was playing for Blackheath and my cousin was playing for Marlow. They played against each other, and my dad refereed it, which was quite hilarious as a family occasion. And there is footage of me from about 1994 behind my dad's video camera, filming it from the touchline. And I'm even in my sort of quite posh home counties voice going, "And there goes Emily, and she's running up the..." And I'm like, does this mean I can technically say I've been commentating on women's rugby since 1994? Can we go with that? So there was that, and I don't know. I think when I first got given the opportunity, I thought, well, these people are obviously working as hard as they can within their world for that shirt. There is a competition for places. Is there as big a player base as the men's, which forces the competition and the standard to be absolutely at its peak? No, it's probably not as high. It's the same as playing for England at touch, which I managed to do, which makes people go, can't be that well then, can it? But, so but it can't not be what it is. That's just the reality of where things are. And so are the people that are competing and playing for those spots working the hardest they possibly can? Yeah. Or at least the hardest they know to work. And as the game gets bigger and harder and more professional, that a lot of these players over the last 5 years have probably gone, blimey, I didn't know I could work even harder than I used to, but I'm having to, and all that kind of stuff. So I just always felt that because, in a lot of areas, the skill level didn't seem as good, and sometimes now still isn't, I'm happy to say, and I know that a lot of the players would agree with me still, then it was easily dismissed. And I was very keen to sort of show whenever I covered it that it was still okay to be fair. It was okay to say that was absolutely brilliant, but that was terrible. And they'll be really disappointed with that because they know they're better than that. And I would have players come up to me, a week or two after games and say, by the way, thank you. It's the first, you've been honest. And a lot of people are either patronizing or they look the other way if something was crap. And so actually it was really important to me to be real about it, but also at the same time to have that bit of sympathy with the fact that this game is not being terribly well supported. It's not got much money in it. It hasn't got much sponsorship behind it. And there is that, build it and they will come argument, chicken and egg. Well, when's it good enough to invest the money in, or when do we put the money in to make it good enough argument? And I think it's still a bit of both. I think unions need to understand that it's not cost, it's investment. You invest in the women's game, more grassroots women will pick up their boots and play. Who knows, a young mother at 35 who's got an 8-year-old daughter who they're going to start going down the club, and she decides she's going to get a pair of boots and play in the women's team while the daughter's playing. Well, actually, the son and the husband might go, do you know what, we should be playing this as well. The women's game and the growth of that is only going to cyclically bring more men back into the game, in my view. So the idea that it's kind of seen as a cost to put into that side of it, grassroots, for me is absurd. The rugby has got to a point where the amateur men's game has been going backwards in this country because of crumbling clubhouses and lack of investment. And I think there is growth in the game, and it's in the women's game. So let's make the absolute most of that. And the skill set and the standard in a lot of areas is now going through the roof. And yes, you will still have games where the standard is not great, but it's changing, and it's changing super fast, and it's on its way. And I'm a massive believer. And sometimes games fail to deliver. The France-England Six Nations decider wasn't that great in my view, and we'd all spent the previous week hyping it up, and we were like, if you're into women's rugby, you should watch this. It's going to be good. Oh God, it was fairly exciting. But the amount of men's games that do that, similarly, it was a tight sort of cup finally sort of game. It didn't really deliver. Well, how often do we say that? So I think people can get off their back. People can get off the back of people championing it, because it has to be championed for people to start seeing it, for them to see the skill level, for them to see that it's worth investment and telling people about. Are we turning around to people and saying, this England-Wales game is going to be as good as South Africa against New Zealand in the Rugby Championship? Well, no, of course it's not. But look at these girls belt 7 bells out of each other because of how much it means to them. It's great rugby. It might be slightly different, but it's still worthwhile, and the work that the athletes are putting in is no less. And I think that's the respect that a lot of people fail to give them, is the idea that they're doing anything less, or that it's an easier ride for them to be playing for their club or country, and it's just simply not the case. So I think that's why. And I don't know whether, as an LGBT broadcaster, there's a sort of fighting alongside the other minority side of it that I do as an ally. Maybe it might be partly that. I've sort of reflected on that over the last few years, and equality is hugely important to me. So the idea that And it's always the way. You'll know this, Bruce, from the darker sides of social media. It's the people that probably haven't watched it or don't know anything about it that are shouting the loudest about how rubbish it might be, and that just doesn't make any sense. And you're best not giving it any airtime to those sort of people. But they can often be the voices that shout the loudest. So you just kind of have to find a way of shouting even louder. But life isn't all about social media, thank goodness, because otherwise it wouldn't be a terribly fun place.
But you do it well. You do social media well, and I think the women's game does social media well. I think it's been really positive during lockdown of 18 months. I think the women's social media and the accessibility, like Rachel Burford, Rocky Clark, Tamara Taylor, Rona Loy, I think a lot of these role models have really found I don't know if they found a gap or if there was just more time or what it was, but how important is it, do you think, for these people to tell their stories?
Yeah, massively, because where the amateur men's game came from was through great stories and players being vets or doctors or RAF pilots or bin men, whatever it might be. These people had jobs and careers, and they fed into how they were doing what they were doing, the support they got from family, and all this kind of thing. And we will slowly lose a bit of that as the women's game gets professional over the next few years. But there are an awful lot of stories to be told, and characters to find. Shauna Brown, for example, has got a great story of coming to rugby relatively late. She was caber tossing in the Highlands and power lifting and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And then she, was on the back row, and then they said, no, we're going to make you into a prop for England. And she was like, oh, I don't know the first thing about a scrum. And she'll probably tell you she still doesn't. But what an athlete, what an incredible player. And the likes of Rachel Burford, who does so much for the next generation with the Girls Rugby Club and the work that's being done there. And representation for GB7s, those girls that are going out to Tokyo to do all that. There's an awful lot of role model work that these players do. And I see it when I'm at a game and there's a clutch of 7-8-year-old girls around me desperate to get, Emily Scarrett's signature or Rocky Clark and these sort of players. And that's so cool. And it's providing for me the right type of role modelism, for want of an expression, because, I've got a niece and nephew who are in their teens, and I cannot fathom what an Instagram teenage life must be. I mean,
it's scary, frightening.
How on earth you decide what your body image is going to be, or how to ignore it, or how to, it absolutely, the mind boggles. I would have made so many mistakes. There'd be so much of my past that's out there and not able to reclaim that I would be so crestfallen about. So thank God camera phones weren't around during my teenage years and all that kind of stuff. Amen. Yeah. So I think the more that these athletes can show, look, let's put the phone down, let's go over here and run around. And whether you're, fat, thin, tall, short, whatever it is, rugby's still a game for you at this level, and you can play a part. And I think that's still, at the end of the day, is one of the key things about the sport. Yes, there's a homogeneity to the players at the top end; they are all a certain size and weight and whatever, but the grassroots game hasn't changed. And I think, someone said to me, why do you think rugby is better at its inclusivity, whether that's LGBT or women's side generally? And I was like, well, because historically people come to the game from all sorts of backgrounds with, all sorts of physical attributes, but there is a role for them to play within the team. And so if you needed the 18-stone bloke to burrow over from 4 meters away to score the winning try, he's as deserving of the beers in the bar at the end of the game than the 5'8" nippy little scrum half that scored the game's opening try. And the two of them are equal to whatever the team have put forward, and no one cares about who they are or what they do off the field. But in their own way, they've contributed exactly the same way to a team on it. And I think there's an element, therefore, of accepting people for everything that they bring, and that probably is a bit of a reason why the sport has been pretty accepting. It's got work to do, obviously, but yeah, I think that's a big part of it for me, from women's game and right throughout the sport.
So have you been lucky? Because I've read and I've heard you talk about you've never experienced anything other than a pretty happy time within the game because of those reasons you've already given. Have you just been lucky, or do you feel that is not necessarily a majority, but lots of people are able to enjoy that?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I have been relatively lucky. I think I've chosen the points at which to talk and get things out there. You know, I think probably the most negative things I ever get is, yes, all right, we get it, you're a gay broadcaster, do you have to keep going on about it, or, you know, it shouldn't matter, that kind of argument. And I understand that, but while there are things going on in plenty of places and countries, and you know, UEFA's stance on stuff with the football and various other bits, and you just think it's really not hard to just, you know, keep reminding people that who you love is irrelevant to everything else in life. And you know, I could go to my soapbox for a long time about it, politically, nationally, and everything else. But sports wise within the game, I think, again, it's stories, hearing from people and understanding what they've been through. It's, you know, it's still mad in one sense that there will still be a frisson, a story or something within probably the first couple of guys that may come out in a male professional currently still playing environment. I think hopefully we can create enough of an environment within the men's game that actually it will be the next generation. It'll be a 17, 18, 19-year-old in an academy who's a damn good player, and everyone knows that he's bisexual or gay or whatever. And then he will just be then a professionally contracted player, and there won't be any coming out. There won't be any reveal story. There are so many gay women in the game as well. That just doesn't seem to be a story. So there's a real double standard in terms of what the media decide, you know, and that's clearly down to some, probably in my view, some perception of I don't know, masculinity or something, you know, who knows. But yeah, I feel like I've been pretty lucky, and there are moments when I feel that I'm, you know, I have a bit of a platform that I will feel it's a time to say something. With our lovely friend Israel Folau, the moments he decides to share his religious beliefs, I've got no problem with anyone having religious beliefs. That's absolutely fine. And I'm also not going about the argument that people used to give to gay people, like, I don't mind who you sleep with, I just don't need to shout about it and ram it down my throat. I get that too. You know, I'm not making that argument, but I also think that it's important to not be actively putting things out there that could be having direct harm to young people. And so, you know, if you realize that a couple of the things that you believe in are quite inflammatory and could cause harm to people, maybe have the nous not to put those people in harm's way. But if you're going to throw caution to that and just start spouting stuff and putting stuff on social media that could make some 14-year-old kid in Wollongong in Australia, you know, decide that actually if his hero can't cope with him and thinks he's a sinner for just something that's natural, and you know, finds himself hanging from the garage fittings on one Monday afternoon because of what something Israel Folau said, that, you know, the idea of it is absurd. So I think people in those sort of situations have to be very, very careful of what they say. And I don't think he's the sharpest tool to realise what he's saying half the time. So it's best being silenced as often as possible. That's my personal view.
And you are well entitled to it. But you're a champion, and you're enthusiastic, and the way you go about things is so positive, and that must bring you some positive back the way. Have there been moments where you've been really surprised with the way you've been received somewhere, or the offer that you've had purely off the back of they just think this is a good guy?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, constantly, because I think I still have like a lot of people, there's a touch of imposter syndrome, and you know, am I good enough? I, even doing the recent Channel 4 games, I thought, well, is this the point at which you go, I got here, I did it? You know, well, no, obviously not, because I want to be doing England, New Zealand in a World Cup final, or, you know, whatever it might be. And so my climate, but I've a total feeling that actually if I ever got to do that, I probably wouldn't feel like I was there yet, you know, and I think that's what a lot of people say. So I'm trying to have more recognition of just the here and now, being ever present. It sounds like a very mindfulness thing to say, but I think it's important for mental health and those kind of things, because if you're going to obsess one afternoon about things not feeling great, well, you need to make the most of the morning that they were pretty good, and I think that's important to do. It's interesting. It's one of those. I'm happy that I'm a good person, and that my morals and aims are right in terms of wanting people to feel included, to respect other people. I think as soon as I come across people that don't show those qualities, I'm not very patient with them, and I could probably be better there. And I can be pretty dismissive of people whose characters I've decided are not fit for purpose. But always happen to be proven wrong. And then I think it's for me, whether it's kind of speaking to people in interviews, covering rugby matches, broadcasting, I think it's about giving everyone a fair crack of the whip as much as possible. And therefore, I just hope that I get the same back, I guess. And there are people, there's a producer as part of one area of broadcasting that I know I'm not his cup of tea. And there's a whole batch of work I could do over on that side of rugby that I'm probably not going to get to do, but that's fine. That's personal preference. That's the way it goes. I'm getting the call to do some gigs that I know other peers of mine would be like, Nick Heath got that one again. Damn it! I know that's happening as well. I'm sure it is, because of how I feel when I see some other people get work. But I made a kind of agreement to myself. 2019, Tom May has a lot to answer for, because I've done various bits with Tom over the years, and he's a good guy. And I was sort of saying, I saw that so-and-so got that gig, and that would have been cool. And he was like, "You commentators, you're all a nightmare." And I was just like, "What?" And I was just like, you guys do the co-coms are the same. And he was like, no. He's like, all of you are just at each other's backs and just like, oh, well, I saw they got that and I should have got that. And I thought, I don't like how, if this is how I'm portraying myself, I don't like the sound of this at all. So I made a pledge to myself to just cut it out, and be happy with what I got, not to be judging people over the fence or saying anything negative about anyone who got elsewhere. And serendipitously, but who knows how much karma had a role to play in it, I then went on to have my best year ever, within the game, and then lockdown hit a year later, or sort of 7 months later, and then everything else took off. So there's something in that for me anyway, whether you believe in fate or whatever it might be called. But I just thought, actually trying to be sounder of mind and not be toxic to what other people are doing, but just focus on, like a good coach would say in a rugby game, control the controllables, and just try and focus on what you can do positively. And that in turn has meant, I know that you're a great champion for a lot of mental health stuff, Bruce, and I think it's fantastic. And there's no limit on the amount of times happiness can need to be sort of shared and suggested almost. And I think that side of things is really important. And I think therefore I think for me it's just about trying to do the right thing and hoping that if you do that, then it kind of comes back to you in the right way.
I love it, and it's so simple, and I totally agree. If you can enjoy the moment you're in, then the next moment will come. And I'm not sure I believe in the karma and fate, but I think you put good stuff out because that's the right thing to do, and then it'll come back. And if someone else gets an opportunity, well done to them, but yours will come. Nick, I absolutely love it. I've taken up so much of your time. I could go on and on and on. There's so many threads to take. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I've loved talking to you. So to finish off, can you finish the sentence for me? And I am intrigued as to where this is going. Nick Heath, for you, happiness is?
Happiness is probably seeing my sister's Labrador Spike, who gives me the biggest welcome and cuddle every time I see him, because when he was a puppy, we did puppy training. And so it's like we're old friends. We went through something together. So I think probably, a cuddle with an over affectionate Labrador is probably right up there. And then maybe beyond that, a pint of Guinness by a roaring fire in a pub with a decent game of rugby on is a pretty close second.
That sounds pretty spectacular. And being the owner of a over-loving Labrador, yes, I get it. I get it. Me and Maggie spend a lot of time together.
Yeah,
Nick, Heath, you're an absolute star. I really hope that we can speak again and meet again at some point in some stadium somewhere, and maybe share one of those pints of Guinness you've already mentioned.
I will drink to that. Thank you for having me, Bruce. It's been great.
Thank you so much. I've absolutely loved it. All the best, Nick.
Cheers.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, another man who can talk, but so much positivity, so many stories. I hope that we get to meet again in the future, and some pretty sound messages to be taken on there. So keep listening to him. He's all over the place. You can catch Nick Heath on social media. I certainly do. And he makes you smile. And that's one of the good things. If you've enjoyed the podcast, you can get us on Apple, Acast, and Spotify. You can also watch the video on Facebook and YouTube. Tell your friends, subscribe, leave us a review if you've enjoyed it. Remember, if you've got nothing nice to say, then don't bother. Just tell us if you've enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll be back for many, many more. And there's a chance that you might be able to see the pod happen in person. More details for that on social media and all over the show. My name is Bruce Aitchison, and my happiness is egg-shaped. I look forward to speaking to you all again soon.